Joining me now in the studio is UVM Extension agronomist Heather Darby. Heather, welcome to Across the Fence.
Hi, Keith.
Heather, you've been doing some research with hops. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we're actually just getting started on the research. The projects will start this season, so it's very new. And the goal of the hops research is to figure out the best production practices and best hop varieties for northern New England.
Now, I did a story many, many years ago doing hops research with Leonard Perry, Across the Fence favorite. Why revive this now?
Yeah, well, there's lots of reasons that we're reviving it. Some that we heard in the video, that there is an increase in the number of craft brewers and home brewers, microbrews, and so and then also a major increase in the demand for local products, and that also travels into the beverage area. Right. And so people are not just demanding local foods, tomatoes, etc., but they would like locally or beer produced with locally made ingredients. So there's a new demand.
What are the challenges to growing hops? We talked a little bit, while the tape was running. What is a hop, first of all? They're very small. They're little. We saw a little bit in that picture there, but they're very small, and how do they grow?
Yeah. Well, hops are different than most plants we see growing in cultivation in Vermont or on farms. They grow as vines. They're called bines. So they look like a grape leaf, but they grow straight up a piece of twine, essentially, as high as 20 or more feet up. And on the vines, they're the little cones, and those are the hops that are harvested to make beer, to provide beer with some flavor.
Almost looks like a pine cone, right?
It does look like a very papery, thin pine cone.
Green, papery, yes. Thin pine cone. You said that commercially you need to construct a hop yard.
Yes.
What is a hop yard? So you would have all these vines growing up.
Yeah, so a hop yard is some infrastructure that a hop grower would need to essentially produce this crop. So similar, I keep comparing it to grapes. In grapes, you have a grape trellis, and in hops you have a hop trellis, except that they grow a lot taller. So you have poles that are 20 feet tall, and you have wires that essentially hold the vines up so that they can grow to the top. So it's a new type of infrastructure on farms, and that's a hop yard.
We've done programs in the past, and we were looking at some wheat research earlier that you had done in that tape. What have you learned from growing wheat that you can apply to hops, or are they two different animals?
Well, they're very different crops, and I think what we've learned is that when you're dealing with sort of new to Vermont crop, or relatively new to Vermont crop, I guess, or reintroduced crop, right. That we have to relearn about the crop. We have to create base knowledge again on how to grow these crops and best practices. We need to find the right varieties for our climate. Most hops are grown out in the western United States where it's drier, and of course we get a considerable amount of rain here. So we need to find varieties that grow well under those conditions, and that's part of our research.
One of the things that, having worked with you with the wheat, is the infrastructure. Mark mentioned malting, that you would need a malting facility for barley, that the barley needs to be processed. This is kind of the chicken and the egg of grain in Vermont, is that infrastructure. So infrastructure, as far as on farm, easier to achieve than a malting facility?
Well, in terms of growing hops, the infrastructure is costly. It costs about $10,000 an acre. So there is an initial investment for the producer. The other infrastructure that's needed, that's probably, I would say, the bottleneck at this point, is harvesting equipment. Now, Mark had mentioned in the video that the farmer he was working with had 3 plants.
Right, 3
so it's easy enough to harvest by hand the cones from 3 plants. But when you get into acres or anything above an acre, the amount of labor that it would require probably wouldn't make the venture economically feasible.
Right.
And so we need new equipment to harvest hops. And that equipment is not so much difficult to find, but again, like with wheat, we need to scale down. We have smaller farms here, so we need need to find equipment and infrastructure that better suits the needs of our farmers here, and that it's going to take time.
And what about the malting or milling facility? Is that equally part of the bottleneck?
So we can grow barley in Vermont as well as, hops. So we could make a beer made with Vermont ingredients, but as Mark said, it has to be malted, and that's a special process that is not done in Vermont. But there are 2 malting facilities that are starting up again, and those are both in Quebec, which is fortunate for us. So there could be opportunities in the future to send barley from Vermont to those malting facilities and maybe have it returned as Vermont malt. But it's expensive, again, to set up a malting facility, and you also need special expertise. You need a maltster, I believe it's called.
Yes, a maltster. It's a great,
to
great
be
title.
able to adequately take the barley and make it into malt. So it's not something that would most likely be done on farms.
For our venture capitalists out there in the audience, if we had someone, or if you or I hit the lottery tomorrow and we decided to build a malting facility, would that again give the farmers the heads up that, yeah, we could do this is possible? Yeah,
I think when the market is there, then farmers become more interested and more quickly adapt to an available market. Right. So certainly that would up the amount of barley that was grown in Vermont. There are other challenges that we haven't discussed with that, but yeah, certainly when there's someone there ready to buy, generally the farmers follow through with what they need.
Right. Not getting too far ahead of ourselves, but how sustainable would green production be in Vermont? I know we always talk about these things and say, oh, let's go ahead and do this or do that, and then we don't think, 10, 20 years down the line, sustainability.
Well, I think what appears to be sustainable in Vermont at this time and makes good sense is that we're producing food for local markets and for the people that live here. And that's sustainable as long as the people in Vermont continue to want to buy food from Vermont. Right, local food. So I think that there are challenges to production, but when the market demand is there, farmers will continue to produce this in an economically viable and sustainable system. So I see it as being very sustainable.
Just less than a minute to go. You talk to farmers all the time. How excited are they about hops or other grains?
Too excited sometimes. It's great because the amount of interest that's out there to produce local grains and hops and other products as well is unbelievable, really. I mean, it's hard to even put into words how many people want to do something new on their farm or want to start farming, which is something we also want to see, our new farms. So, the barrier, of course, is that we're trying to build infrastructure. I think the markets are there, but it's just figuring out all the pieces, and everybody wants it to happen yesterday. Right. But it does take time. It is new, so.
Well, when you figure out some of those pieces, we'll have you back on as we build the puzzle. Heather, thank you very much. I want to thank everyone here at WCX for making this program possible. And as always, thank you for stopping by Across the Fence.
For a video copy of today's program, call toll-free 1-888-ATF-3430. Across the Fence is brought to you as a public service by University of Vermont Extension, the Vermont Agricultural Experiment Station, and WCAX-TV.